The storm raged outside, its fury unrelenting. Rain lashed against the windows, creating a symphony of chaos. Wind howled like a banshee, its eerie wails echoing through the night. Adel sat in his darkened living room, the only light coming from the occasional flash of lightning. He stared out the window, watching the storm's relentless assault. An unsettling feeling crept over him, a sense of foreboding that he couldn't shake. He had been due to travel, but the storm had other plans. Plans changed. The storm had seen to that. Now he was alone, stuck in his old house. The house, usually a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. He glanced around the room, shadows cast by the flickering lamplight. Shadows danced in the flickering lamplight, creating eerie shapes on the walls. A shiver ran down his spine. Something felt wrong. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. It was as if an unseen presence had entered the house, watching him from the shadows. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the feeling. It was just the storm. He needed to relax. He got up and walked to the window, hoping to find some comfort in the familiar sight. The old oak tree in the yard swayed violently, its branches thrashing in the wind. Its branches scraped against the side of the house, adding to the cacophony. He watched as a bolt of lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder that shook the ground. He jumped back from the window, his heart pounding in his chest. Fear gnawed at the edges of his mind, refusing to be ignored. It was going to be a long night, one filled with uncertainty and unease. Adel turned away from the window. He decided to make some tea. That would calm his nerves. He walked down the hallway towards the kitchen. The floorboards creaked under his feet. The house was old. It often made strange noises, but tonight they seemed louder, more sinister. He stopped outside the kitchen door. He could have sworn he heard a whisper, a soft, sibilant whisper. He listened intently. Silence. He told himself it was his imagination. The wind, perhaps. He took a deep breath and pushed open the kitchen door. The kitchen was dark, lit only by a single dim bulb over the sink. The shadows seemed deeper here, more menacing. He felt a cold spot on the back of his neck, as if someone was watching him. He turned around quickly, but there was no one there. Adel quickly turned on the light above the stove. The kitchen was small, cramped. The wallpaper was peeling at the seams. He moved towards the counter. He needed that tea badly, but as he reached for the kettle, he heard it again. The whisper. This time it was clearer, closer. It seemed to be coming from the pantry door. He froze, his hand hovering over the kettle. His heart pounded in his chest. He listened intently. The whisper came again. A long, drawn-out sigh. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He had to see what was making that sound. He took a hesitant step towards the pantry door, then another. His hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. He took a deep breath and threw open the door. The pantry was empty. There was nothing there. He felt a chill. Relief mixed with a growing sense of unease. He was starting to imagine things, that was all. Adel stepped back from the pantry. He leaned against the counter. His heart was still racing. He needed to get a grip. He glanced at the refrigerator. The door was slightly ajar. He distinctly remembered closing it earlier. He walked over and pulled open the door. The light inside flickered and died. He sighed. Typical. He reached for the carton of milk, but as his hand closed around the carton, he felt something brush against his fingers. Something cold, slimy. He recoiled his hand as if burned. He stared into the darkness of the refrigerator. His blood ran cold. He imagined something lurking in the shadows, watching him. He slammed the refrigerator door shut. He stumbled back, bumping into the counter. He stood there for a moment, frozen in place. He could hear the blood pounding in his ears. He had to get out of the kitchen. Adel practically ran from the kitchen, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't stop until he reached the living room, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. He turned on every light he could find, desperate to banish the shadows that seemed to cling to him. The sudden brightness was a relief, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness that had filled the house moments before. He stood there, panting, trying to calm his racing heart, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that there was no reason to be afraid. There was a logical explanation for everything, he reminded himself, trying to steady his nerves. The whisper he had heard was just the wind, nothing more. The fridge door creaking open was probably just old and loose, not a sign of something sinister. He glanced at the phone on the side table. The thought of calling someone crossing his mind. He should call someone, just to have someone to talk to reassure him that everything was fine. He reached for the phone, his hand trembling slightly as he did so, but as he did so, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness once more. The room was plunged into darkness, the oppressive feeling returning with a vengeance. He cursed under his breath, frustration and fear mingling in his mind. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking as he tried to find it in the darkness. He had to get out of here, the thought pounding in his mind like a drum. He finally found his phone and switched on the flashlight, the weak beam of light barely illuminating his surroundings. The weak beam of light did little to pierce the darkness, but it was better than nothing. He dialed the first number that came to mind, the police. The line was dead. He tried again, still nothing. He was trapped, the realization hitting him like a ton of bricks. Adel put down the phone. He knew no one would be able to reach him in this storm. He was on his own. He took a deep breath. He had to get a grip. Panicking wouldn't help. He shone the flashlight around the room. The shadows seemed to dance and writhe in the beam of light. He could have sworn he saw a figure lurking in the corner of the room. But when he shone the light on it, there was nothing there. He started pacing back and forth, trying to think rationally. He told himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, but deep down, he knew that something was wrong, terribly wrong. He stopped pacing. He listened. The house was silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. Adel slowly made his way through the house. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. Shadows danced on the walls, creating eerie shapes that seemed to move with a life of their own. He checked every room, every closet, every corner, but he found nothing. He was alone, or so he thought. The emptiness of the house felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. As he passed by the living room window, he saw a figure standing in the yard. It was a fleeting glimpse, but enough to send a chill down his spine. It was tall and shadowy, its form barely discernible in the dim light. Its eyes glowed an eerie red in the darkness, piercing through the night like two burning coals. He froze, his blood turning to ice. Fear gripped him, rendering him immobile. He watched as the figure glided towards the house. It moved with an eerie, almost supernatural grace. It moved with an unnatural grace, as if it were floating. Each step seemed to defy the laws of nature. He stumbled back from the window, his heart pounding in his chest. Panic set in. He knew he had to get out of the house now. Every instinct screamed at him to run. He ran to the front door and fumbled with the lock. His hands trembled, making it difficult to turn the key, but the door wouldn't budge. It was stuck. Desperation clawed at him. He pulled at the handle with all his might, but it wouldn't move. He was trapped. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He turned and ran towards the back of the house. His mind raced, searching for another way out. He could hear the figure moving outside, its heavy footsteps echoing his own. Each step seemed to grow louder, closer. He could feel its cold, malevolent presence closing in on him. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread enveloped him. He was running out of time. Every second counted, and he knew he had to act fast. Adel reached the back door. He yanked it open and stumbled out into the storm. The rain lashed at his face. The wind tore at his clothes. But he didn't care. He was out of the house. He had escaped. He started to run, but he didn't get far. He felt a cold hand close around his arm. He stopped in his tracks. Slowly, he turned to face his pursuer. The figure stood before him. Its features were hidden by the shadows, but he could feel its eyes burning into him. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He was paralyzed with fear. The figure leaned in close. Its breath was cold on his cheek. He could smell the stench of decay. "There is no escape," the figure whispered. Its voice was a low, guttural growl. "You are mine now." Adel closed his eyes. He knew it was over. He had become a prisoner in his own home, trapped by the shadows that lurked within its walls. He felt the figure's grip on his arm tighten. He was dragged back towards the house, back into the darkness. He didn't struggle. He knew it was futile. He was resigned to his fate. As he stepped back inside, he cast one last glance at the storm-ravaged night. Lightning flashed, thunder roared, and then everything went dark.